if your husband or your son or your dad was in photos like this, you'd be horrified, right? Even though they're not illegal, they're just dodgy and they give completely the wrong vibe.
So over 300,000 documents relating to the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein have been released by the Department of Justice in the US. The latest tranche of photos and documents contain images of famous people such as Bill Clinton, Mick Jagger and Michael Jackson as well. But the department did miss a legal deadline to publish the entire contents of the files. Sonia, to come to you on this first, overarching or sort of underlying all the conversation about the release of the so-called Epstein files is what justice actually looks like. And I don't think we've got it yet, have we?
No, absolutely not. And I think sometimes it feels like this has become a bit of a celebrity circus in the US and more broadly across the rest of the world. It's also become a bit of a political football, which is why we're not seeing all the documents released at once. It feels like things are being released selectively in order to get at political opponents, even though there is this order from Congress ordering the release of all the documents. So I think if you were a girl who's been abused by Jeffrey Epstein or by the network of very well-connected, wealthy men who have allegedly abused young girls who Epstein trafficked them for sexual abuse, you would just be feeling pretty hopeless, quite frankly. And I think it's an example of how systems really work to maintain, cover up and protect very powerful rich men who are involved in wrongdoing. I mean, we don't even know what their names are apart from Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, it's a fair point. And Gillian, that institutional cover-up point is not unique to the US, actually, is it? That when campaigners, when activists, when victims, when survivors are in the pursuit of information and justice, that they are often held off by institutions.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it several times, haven't we? From Hillsborough to contaminated blood, the grooming gangs, which is obviously still live now. And the question is always, and I think today's question is, why have some been held back, which is leads into Sonia's point about whether there is some political manoeuvring and whether, what's coming out in the next lot. But the question goes back to, so what's it identified as? There's 1,200 victims. That's sort of new, I think, that's come out. So the number of different victims have been redacted. But the question for them is, what does justice look like? So obviously there's public disgrace. Well, is that only Mandelson and Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, or are there more people who are going to be publicly disgraced? Are there any prosecutions being prepared? It doesn't seem that way, looking at what people are saying about this evidence. I haven't been through it all, but are there any prosecutions being prepared? And it's a very high bar, obviously, to prepare prosecutions, and obviously a lot of this is historic. So in the absence of that, what happens for the victims? Is there compensation? Does that come from the Epstein estate? So all of these questions, which are really what the victims will want to hear, we're no real further forward on those. And I suspect even when the next lot of information is released, we won't be either. But they're the things that need to be continually pushed, because 1,200 victims, that is massive. This is the same size as the grooming gangs, probably, in terms of number of victims who have been sexually trafficked.
Yeah, and Sonia, on that point that sort of Gillian's making about the next lot of files whenever they're released, there is a risk here, isn't there? Because it's become so political, it was a part of Trump's campaign for re-election. There is a risk that actually it's never satisfactory, and actually we never feel like we've had all the information. I mean, today, one of the sort of bits of evidence, I suppose, one of the documents, over 100 pages, and the entire thing is just a black box. The entire thing has been redacted. So even in the publication of these things, there's a frustration in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for once and for all, you just need to see the full release of these documents so victims' lawyers can go through them, and as Gillian says, prosecutions can start or civil cases can start. But it just, honestly, it just feels, I think, like there's some game playing going on here, and that doesn't feel right, because this is such a serious issue. And, I think it's important to say this story, we don't know exactly who the men are beyond Jeffrey Epstein, and Prince Andrew has also been accused. He denies. allegations, but there were clear associations there, social associations there with Epstein. We know Mandelson was in that social circle. There are pictures of other men in that social circle. But, you know, if you take away sort of the names and the idea that this is very rich, wealthy men, there are real parallels with other cases of child sexual abuse by networks of men, such as the grooming gang scandals in the UK. And it is always the case that these men find ways of escaping justice, of escaping accountability. And that is really wrong. And it's something we've got to change.
And Gillian, that's something that struck me. So while this latest release of Epstein Files may not contain anything that feels brand new, what it does is reinforce how integrated Jeffrey Epstein was in the worlds of politics and royalty and business and celebrity and music and culture and all of these places. And how he was sort of, well, it feels like from the photos and things, how he was kind of warmly embraced by these extremely powerful people.
I mean, you ask, is there anybody he didn't meet? I mean, I think there's also some suggestion he met Tony Blair at Downing Street. And
yes,
I mean,
and that was a Mandelson request, it's reported as well.
Yeah, so he was warmly welcomed everywhere. And I suppose that is power and wealth. You know, there is that sort of, you know, superficial judgment of people that, oh, you're wealthy, therefore you must be important, or you're powerful, therefore you must be important. And it is really a lesson that, you know, that wrong people doing the wrong things. And you can see, we were looking at some of these photos. If your husband or your son or your dad was in photos like this, you'd be horrified, right? Even though they're not illegal, they're just dodgy and they give completely the wrong vibe. Not the ones at Ascot, obviously, but, you know, the hot tub ones lying across girls' laps and that kind of thing. Particularly when all of these girls' faces are redacted, which means, you know, that they're one of these people that has been, you know, is one of the people who has been identified as being trafficked. So there is just generally, a question, I think, for many people. And it's interesting as a politician because there's 1,000 pictures you're in and you don't know half the people you're in, and you can be in lots of social settings and sometimes they can get you into trouble later. But these seem like these were ongoing social relationships that were deeper than that. And clearly anyone that went to the island is literally going to be put under another level of scrutiny.
Yeah, and it's a fair point, and it's worth stating that being in these photos is not a suggestion of wrongdoing at all at this point.
No.
At least, you know, and I think that is a crucial thing that we must bear in mind. What you say there, though, Gillian, is fascinating because there's only so much you can do, I suppose, is what you're saying. If you're in a room of 100 people and everyone's, you know, lining up to try and get a picture with you as a politician or a whatever, then actually that is part of what happens in that sort of world.
Yeah, and you have to separate the ones that are taken at, you know, all lining up at Ascot watching a horse race, or to ones where you've got, you know, people whose heads are redacted next to you in a hot tub, or lying across, or you're lying across their laps, or you know, they're partially clothed, or those kind of things. So you do have to separate them, and there'll be many people, I'm sure, who'll be horrified at even being even close to this, their names being associated with it, and they'll obviously have done nothing wrong apart from being in the same social setting.